we are, OpTech Futures Lab.
First day.
First day. Excited to have you here. Thank you for spending some time with us. We're all excited to learn a lot about you and obviously PredictAP, but
Appreciate that.
tell us your story, your journey, your founding team.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. So my background, I'm an accountant by background and geek at heart. So I'm a lazy accountant. So I ended up finding ways to use technology to automate my tasks early on in my career. That led me on a path to leading technology at Colony Capital. So finding ways to bring a global platform with Yardi and Nexus and MRI and Sage and all that into being. And so I spent 20 years at Colony Capital, working my way up from an analyst up to heading the business app side of that. And in there, I came across the problem that became PredictAP. So my background is just finding a way to make things work for tech at big real estate companies. My co-founder is Russell Franks. He's got a great background on the making startups happen. So it was a great combination where I had this really deep industry knowledge. He had a real, here's how you make startups happen knowledge, and that we brought those together to make the company.
It's really rare, Dave, that you get like deep subject matter expertise and marry that with technology. It's a rare combination.
I think it's interesting. I think you're right. A lot of times I feel like it's tech looking for a problem.
Yeah.
And the fewer times is it, hey, here's a real thorough understanding of a problem, and then it turns out there wasn't a solution, and then it's how do we figure out how to apply the technology. That's actually one of the other two kind of key members of the team. Chris Antonessi is our head of tech, and so he was a buddy of mine from high school. And so when I had this idea, so right around the beginning of COVID, he was at Apple, and he was sitting at home, bored, and I said, I have this idea. And here's a chance for you to build a tech stack from a blank piece of paper. He was super excited about that, and 3 months later, he's leaving Apple, and so that was that. And then Greg Achenbach, our head of product, is someone that Russell had worked with as well. So those are kind of the founding four.
That's amazing. Tell us about PredictAP. Tell us about the problem that you solve, your target audience.
Yeah, so PredictAP is focused on one thing, which is the ingestion and coding of invoices in real estate. Not the most, a glamorous part of it, but it's a tenacious problem where, by its nature, half of what's coming into accounting departments is from AP, right? Thousands and thousands of invoices are coming in every day, and there's many, many solutions in the market around how to pay that. So payments is the most lucrative part of AP.
Yeah.
Plenty of good solutions out there. And so Colony, we had found a payment solution. We'd found a workflow approval solution. Plenty of good companies out there. What we didn't have was a good way to get it in there. We had 30 AP people. We had this woman, Krissa, who'd been there forever leading AP. We had some outsourced services. We had some OCR. Kind of worked until Krissa retired and the wheels came off the bus. And that really highlighted for me that, hey, there's AP is really underappreciated in how much knowledge they have. When that bill comes into the mothership and gets split 37 different ways and it's nowhere on the invoice, that's the problem we found. And that turns out it's actually a perfect use case for AI because you have pattern, you have actually nice structured data, and you still have a person in the loop, which is kind of a critical third part. And so I spent about a year looking in the market to find the firm that had done this. So I thought, hey, everyone's got this problem, someone must have done it. Yeah. Didn't find it, just found disappointment. So I said, hey, well, why don't I solve it? And so we did something in-house, and it turns out we really caught on to a really great problem. And so that's where I decided to, the 45-year-old with 2 small kids, to leave my comfy job and launch a startup.
This sounds familiar. It sounds familiar.
Yeah, I know you're.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
So startups are all about journeys. They're all about milestones. Tell us some of the important milestones that you've hit along the way.
Yeah, so I think getting that first customer, I think that's a big thing. Is I was always worried that once we launched the app, I was worried 6 months later, someone's going to say, hey, haven't you heard of, Coyote X or, something else that does exactly what you do and solves it? But now I'm very convinced no one's really focused solely on the coding bit. So I think the first milestone was getting that first customer, getting it done, and then just growing it. I think I distinctly remember hitting, when you hit 100,000 of sales, you're feeling good. When you get the 500,000th invoice, the million. So I think it's just being able to show this works at scale with some really marquee names or marquee big customers. Those are the big milestones. Getting our integration with Yardi, getting our integration with Nexus, working with them. So I think it's just, I think our next one is going to be the 3 million invoices is our next big milestone.
Amazing. That's huge. Super cool. You touched on this. AI is very much disrupting multifamily. There's many different kind of use cases or applications. You've latched onto a perfect one. Where else do you see AI playing in our space?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the the back and forth. So last year, AI was just it's panacea, right? Everyone is looking. I need AI. I need to check that box that I'm doing it because that tells me I'm modern, right? And I feel like a lot of times folks were, it was the hammer and looking for a nail, and not really appropriate for a lot of problems. And a lot of problems you don't need AI. And so what we found as the dust settles is that narrow and deep uses of AI seem to be very effective, right? So Profia on lease abstraction, Entra on investor side letters, things where there's a very specific narrow focus tends to have a little more structured data and a more narrowed use case. We're also seeing it obviously on the chatbots and kind of that customer facing side of things. I'm more focused on the back office applications, but what I've seen be very effective is first off understanding it's a tool, right? I don't think anyone's saying that AI is at a place now where it's a human replacement. It's a very enthusiastic intern that's going to sometimes have terrible judgment. So you have to find cases where there is that kind of narrow, deep application that can tee up, say it's 80, 90% of the situations that you're going to face every day, but you still need exception management on the outliers.
Yeah. Specifically then to accounting within real estate, feels like accounting's still ripe for disruption, right?
Yes.
Like, even as a startup, I go through QuickBooks and I'm like, man, someone needs to overhaul this. Where do you see PredictAP in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, so accounting is massive, right? And I think there's incredible complexity. Even within what we're tackling, you could look at a spectrum of simple things that are, hey, every time it's very straightforward, it's coded this way, to incredibly nuanced coding decisions. And so accounting as a whole, I do think we're going to see, 5-10 years down the road have big changes. For us, it's about being able to really effectively solve that coding problem. And this is why in real estate, why it's particularly difficult, where other industries maybe don't have such an issue. But the reality is every building could have a different accounting treatment, right? You can recover costs here. Oh, this lease, you can't recover costs. So this is industrial triple net. You have to pass it through that way. Yeah, this one is multifamily, and we're rebuilding the building. We're capitalizing in a certain way. So I think where AI does a really good job is getting into those patterns where there is, some sort of logic that's occurring. And I think what we're seeing is our ability to handle larger and more complex coding. So, down that path where that lawn bill that gets split amongst 12 properties every month, probably pretty simple. That 200-page general contractor invoice where there's retention and job costs and all of that, I think those are much more complicated. Or, fund structure level invoices, a lot more complexity. So we're starting to move down that path of more and more complexity to be able to handle that.
So a perfect lead-on question to that is, any immediate features on the near-term roadmap that you're excited about that you want to share?
Yeah. So we're gonna. So I think one decision that we made early on that was smart was sticking to ingestion and coding of invoices. Right. It's very, very tempting to get into payments or get into workflow. Payments is, again, so much money to be made there, but we want to be the absolute very best at coding. And so with that, we're gonna stick around problems that relate to that. So features that are coming up soon. One is our ability to share with our user confidence scoring. So by that I mean, if we have 1,000 invoices a month coming in, we have a pretty good idea which ones we feel very, very confident in, which one maybe it's a brand new vendor that we have less confidence in, and we want a human to take a second look at that. Before we've had visibility into that from the back end, but we're launching a new feature set for our users that's going to say, hey, these 6 right here, something's up with them, that we should take a look at that. And so that visibility to the user, it's going to change the experience, where instead of having to have that same level of diligence for all 1,000 invoices, maybe they really focus on those 10. And that's going to lead down the path to the next thing is going to be around fraud detection. These tools with AI, they're also used by bad actors. And I think the sophistication of attempts of fraud for real estate companies are great targets, lots of money being spent. And most of fraud has been around, training people on the human, the human techniques of manipulation.
Yeah.
And on that wires leaving the door on the bank side. But we think we have a really good view up front to understand, hey, the way we know it's a certain vendor, the certain things, logos, locations, words, all that stuff. We think enough's right that we think it's this vendor, but enough's wrong that we think someone should look at it because we think someone's manipulated the document.
It really speaks to the perfect complement of AI and humans, right? Like AI can take a lot of that mundane, but it still needs that human verification, like that human level of touch. We're in a very similar boat with the contracts, right? We do that AI abstraction, but we pass to a human verification after that as well.
Yep.
Anecdotally, I heard the funniest story that I mean, funny to some, maybe funny to you because you're solving for this, but a guy recently sent 100 invoices to Google and Facebook, and he wasn't actually a qualified vendor, but they paid it. I mean,
He took a shot.
He took a shot.
Yeah.
Right? And I wonder in our industry, if we sent an invoice to ap@companyname.com, how many would
Don't do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a really good, that makes me think about a lot of things.
That is hopefully exactly what you'll be solving for with the fraud side of this, is identifying
Hey, this is a new vendor. This is suspicious. This is out of the pattern.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. Yeah, but a lot of companies, you're right. It's one of these things that they just want to get that payment out the door. They don't want unhappy vendors, so it tends to do that, and you figure out the problems later. But that can be a very expensive way to handle the problem.
Dave, this is not your first OpTech, is it?
No, it's second.
Second OpTech?
Yeah.
What do you think of the show in general?
It's big. So first off, the location's great. Last year was in Vegas, but here in DC, it's a great location. I took a walk outside and seeing the river and it's really beautiful. But a lot of familiar faces. Even last night, going out out in the walk, saw a lot of people. And doing the shows, I always find invigorating. It kind of recharges the batteries because you see your old friends, see what's new out there, and see what's what problems people are coming up with new solutions for is always exciting. So I think this is definitely one of the ones you have to go to. Super cool.